Mother, I no longer deserve your love. I sold my comrades for a ration of bread, and at night I weep from shame that burns worse than any wound. These words are the last I will write in this life. By the time this letter reaches our village, I will have already taken the only path left to a traitor. I cannot live knowing that Pavel, Sergei, and Dmitri are dead because my hunger spoke louder than my honor. They trusted me with their lives, Mama. They called me brother. And I signed their death warrant for 300 grams of black bread and a piece of horse meat that tasted like salvation but chewed like damnation. The paper trembles in the archivist's hands. Moscow Central Military Archive, February 2019. Case File 7834-B. Stamped classified in fading red ink. Discovered after 76 years of silence. Don't let these voices be forgotten. Subscribe now to help us uncover more forbidden stories buried in the archives of shame. The letter continues, and each word cuts deeper. I want you to know everything, Mama. Not because I seek forgiveness, there is none for what I've done, but because someone must know the truth about how a good man becomes a monster. You raised me to share my bread with those who had none. Do you remember when I gave half my portion to the Morozov children during the famine of 33? You kissed my forehead and called me your little saint. That boy died in Stalingrad, Mama. What came back was something else. Something that would trade 3 lives for a full stomach. Something that would watch friends march to their execution and think only of the meal waiting in return. The smell of that basement on Barricadnaya Street still clings to the paper. Mold, frozen urine, and the sweet stench of gangrene. But stronger than all these, the phantom aroma of black bread that haunts every line. The archivist, Dr. Elena Savalyeva, 63 years old, has to stop reading. In 4 decades of working with war documents, she has never encountered anything quite like this confession. The handwriting itself tells a story, beginning neat and careful, gradually dissolving into desperate scratches, as if the writer's soul was disintegrating with each word. Private Mikhail Petrovich Volkov, 22 years old, from the village of Krasny Gorky, 300 kilometers south of Moscow. To understand his final confession, we must first understand the boy who would become the betrayer. In that village, where wooden houses lean against each other like drunken friends, young Mikhail was known for his voice. The priest, Father Alexander, wrote in his diary, "When the Volkov boy sings at Easter service, even the atheists stop to listen." But it wasn't just his voice that defined him. It was his loyalty. 3 other boys formed his world, and the letter speaks of them with the tenderness of a lover's goodbye. Pavel Turkin was the smartest of us, Mama. His father owned the mill, but Pavel didn't care about grain, he cared about bridges. He carried a notebook everywhere, sketching structures that would connect cities after the war. He drew one for our village once, said it would bring the world to our doorstep. Sergei Kozlov could fix anything, watches, rifles, hearts. His hands were magic. When my boots fell apart in the retreat from Smolensk, he made me new ones from German leather and old tire rubber. They lasted until the end. And Dmitri, poor Dmitri Orlov. You remember him, don't you? The orphan boy you took in after his parents died in the fire? He slept in our barn for 3 winters until we could build him a proper corner in the house. He wanted nothing more than to survive the war and marry Katya from the next village. He showed me her photograph every night before sleep, kissed it like an icon. The 4 friends enlisted together on June 24, 1941. The recruiting sergeant tried to separate them, but they insisted, threatened to desert if split up. "Fine," he said. "Die together then." For 18 months they proved death could be cheated. Through the hell of the retreat, the miracle of Moscow's defense, the meat grinder of Rzev, 4 boys from a nothing village stayed alive by staying together. The letter reveals their system. We had roles, Mama, like a machine with 4 parts. Pavel watched the skies for planes, counted ammunition, calculated our chances. Sergei maintained our weapons, kept them clean even when we hadn't washed in weeks. Dmitri, blessed Dmitri, could find food anywhere. He had a nose for it. Once he found potatoes buried under a collapsed church. Another time a jar of pickles in a destroyed tank. And me? I was their memory of home. When the guns stopped, when the cold bit through our souls, I sang your lullabies. I told them about the taste of your Easter bread, about the way morning frost sparkles on birch trees behind our house. I kept them human when everything demanded we become animals. Stalingrad changed everything. By January 1943, the 62nd Army had been in continuous combat for 5 months. The city had ceased to be a place and become a geography of rubble and frozen corpses. In the basement on Barricadnaya Street, 47 Soviet soldiers slowly starved while waiting for orders that never came. The ration had been cut to 100 grams of bread per day, when there was bread at all. The letter becomes more desperate here, the handwriting erratic. You cannot imagine hunger like this, Mama. It's not pain. Pain would be merciful. It's a voice in your head that never stops screaming. It makes you see bread in the clouds, smell meat in the gunpowder. It turns you into something that thinks only of the next bite, the next swallow. We made soup from leather belts, from wallpaper paste scraped from the ruins. I saw a man gnaw on a wooden beam for hours, convinced it would yield nutrition if he just kept chewing. Another soldier, a professor from Leningrad before the war, carefully cut strips from his own leather coat and boiled them for 6 hours, creating a broth that smelled like death but which we drank as if it were mother's milk. Then came February 17, 1943, the date that would haunt Mikhail Volkov until his last breath. The letter describes it with horrifying clarity. Lieutenant Krupin called me to what had been the school director's office. Strange how even in ruins you could tell it had been a place of authority. He had bread on his desk, Mama. Real bread. Black, heavy, beautiful bread. And beside it, a tin with meat. The smell made me dizzy. I thought I would faint. Volkov, he said, I have a proposition. There are traitors among us. Men planning to desert to the Germans. I need names. 3 names. You know everyone, you hear everything when they think you're just singing. Give me 3 names, and this food is yours. I should have spit in his face. I should have walked out. Instead, I stared at that bread and asked, how do you know there are traitors? He smiled, God, that smile, and said, there are always traitors, Volkov. The only question is whether they're reported by a patriot or discovered by accident. The pen scratches deeper into the paper here, as if trying to carve the confession into stone. I gave him the names, Mama. Pavel, Sergei, and Dmitri. My brothers. My soul. I told myself I was lying, that nothing would happen, that it was just bread for names, not lives for food. But I knew. In my heart, I knew. Krupin wrote them down slowly, carefully, like he was recording Holy Scripture. Then he pushed the bread and meat across the desk. Eat here, he said. Don't want you sharing with traitors. So I ate, Mama. I ate while my friends slept 50 meters away, trusting I was keeping watch. The bread tasted like earth and blood. The meat was tough, stringy, probably horse, maybe dog. It was the best meal I'd had in months and the worst of my life. The archivist has to pause again. Outside the archive, Moscow traffic continues its endless flow. But in this room, time has stopped at February 1943. The letter continues with details that seem impossible to have written. They came for them at dawn. I pretended to be asleep, but I watched through half-closed eyes. Pavel went quietly. He always suspected everyone of everything, so perhaps he wasn't surprised. Sergei fought. It took 3 men to drag him out, and he kept shouting about his innocence, about his service record, about the Germans he'd killed. Dmitri looked at me, straight at me. He knew I was awake. He knew, Mama. In that moment, he knew what I had done. But he said nothing. Just looked at me with those gray eyes. The same eyes that had thanked us for taking him in after the fire, and then walked out between 2 guards like he was going for morning inspection. These voices from the past must not be silenced. If this story moves you, subscribe to support our mission to reveal the untold truths of history. The next part of the letter shifts between past and present, as if Mikhail's mind was fracturing. I lived 6 more weeks in that basement. 6 weeks of eating regular rations while others starved. 6 weeks of avoiding eyes, of singing less, of pretending grief for my missing friends. Some believed they had deserted. Others whispered about execution. No one suspected me. How could they? I was Mikhail the singer, Mikhail the loyal, Mikhail who had stayed with his friends through every battle. Lieutenant Krupin was transferred out in March, promoted, they said, for maintaining discipline. Before he left, he stopped by my position. You did the right thing, Volkov, he said. Those three were planning to desert. We found German propaganda in their belongings. Lies, Mama. I knew their belongings better than my own. Pavel kept only his notebook of bridges. Sergei had his tools and a photo of his sister. Dmitri had Katya's picture and the wooden cross you gave him. No propaganda. No treason. Just 3 hungry boys killed by a 4th hungry boy who valued his stomach over his soul. The letter then reveals the dreams that would torment Mikhail. Every night, they visit me. Not as ghosts seeking revenge, but worse, as friends checking on me. Pavel shows me his new bridge designs, explains how they'll revolutionize river crossings. Sergei offers to fix my rifle, notices the worn trigger before I do. And Dmitri shares his plans for the wedding, asks if I'll sing at the ceremony. They act as if nothing happened, as if I didn't murder them with words, as if friendship transcends betrayal. I wake up screaming not from fear but from shame. The other soldiers think it's combat fatigue. If only it were that simple. Combat fatigue can be treated. What I have is a rot in my soul that spreads a little more each day. The confession grows more philosophical, yet more desperate. I've been thinking about Judas, Mama. The priest always said Judas was the ultimate evil, selling Christ for 30 pieces of silver. But Judas hanged himself afterward. He couldn't live with what he'd done. That makes him more human than me. I sold my brothers for bread, and I kept living. I kept eating, breathing, fighting. I even got promoted last week, Sergeant Volkov now. They gave me a medal for bravery during the January offensive. Bravery, Mama. They decorated a traitor for courage. The medal burns against my chest like a brand. I want to tear it off, throw it in the mud, scream the truth to everyone. But I don't. Because I'm not just a traitor, I'm a coward. A coward who chose his life over 3 others, and now doesn't even have the courage to end the life he preserved so shamefully. Here, the letter turns to direct address to his victims. Pavel, if there's a heaven and you're reading over God's shoulder, know that your bridges haunt me. Every river I cross, I see your designs. Every connection between banks reminds me of the connection I severed. Sergei, your hands that could fix anything can't fix what I broke. There's no tool for repairing a soul that chose bread over brotherhood. And Dmitri, my almost brother, the orphan we took in, whom I orphaned again, Katya married another man. I heard through a letter from the village. A carpenter from the next district. She waited a year, then moved on. You died for nothing, and I lived for less than nothing. The physical description of writing the letter adds another layer of immediacy. My hand shakes as I write this, Mama. Not from cold, we finally have heating in this new position, but from the weight of the pen. Each word feels like lifting a mountain. The other men are sleeping. It's my watch, but instead of watching for Germans, I'm watching my past unspool onto paper. The candle is military issue, made from animal fat. It smells like death, which is appropriate. Everything I touch turns to death. The paper is German, taken from a destroyed command post. Even my confession is stolen, written on the enemy's stationery. How fitting. The letter addresses his mother's imagined questions. You're wondering why now? Why write this now? Because tomorrow we attack. A major offensive, they say. The chance to push them back finally. And I've decided I won't survive it. This isn't suicide, Mama. God knows I don't have that kind of courage. It's justice. I'll fight. I'll kill as many as I can. But I won't take cover when I should. I won't retreat when ordered. I'll stand where bullets fly thickest and let God or the devil, whoever claims traitors, decide my fate. If I die, this letter will be found and sent. If by some cruel miracle I survive, I'll burn it and write another before the next battle. Either way, you'll know the truth. You deserve that much. You deserve to know that the son you loved died the moment he reached for that bread. The archivist notes that water damage, tears most likely, makes the next section difficult to read. But the words that survive are perhaps the most powerful. Don't mourn me, Mama. Mourn Pavel, who will never build his bridges. Mourn Sergei, whose clever hands are now just bones in Stalingrad soil. Mourn Dmitri, who died believing in brotherhood while his brother counted bread crusts. But don't mourn Mikhail. He died before them, the moment hunger became stronger than honor. What writes this letter is just a uniform with a voice, singing songs to men who don't know they're listening to a traitor's lullabies. Every note I sing is poisoned by what I've done. Beauty from my throat is blasphemy when 3 better men are silent because of me. A section near the end addresses faith. Father Alexander baptized me in the river behind the church. You held me while he poured the water, and you said I cried so loud, the angels heard me in heaven. I wonder if they heard me that night I ate the bread. I wonder if they turned away in disgust or wept for what I'd become. There's no God in Stalingrad, Mama, or if there is, he's not the one from our village church. The God here watches children freeze to death, watches good men become monsters, watches monsters get promoted. Maybe that's why I could do what I did. In a godless place, everything is permitted. But that's a lie I tell myself. God didn't leave Stalingrad. I left God the moment I said those 3 names. The letter's penultimate section returns to brutal honesty. I want to lie to you, to say they tortured the names from me, that I held out until my body broke. I want to claim they threatened to shoot me, to send you to the camps, to destroy our entire village. But you raised me to tell the truth, even when it burns. The truth is simple and terrible. I was hungry, and hunger won. No torture, no threats, just a gnawing emptiness in my stomach that spoke louder than conscience. I traded 3 lives for perhaps 600 grams of food. Do the mathematics of that, Mama. 200 grams per soul. That's the price I set on friendship. Less than half a loaf for each heart that stopped beating because of me. As the letter nears its end, the handwriting becomes almost illegible, as if the writer was dissolving. The sun is coming up. Soon reveille will sound, and I'll wake the others for what might be our last day. I'll help them prepare, check their weapons, share what might be a final cigarette. They trust me, these new comrades. They've heard me sing, seen me fight, watched me care for the wounded. They don't know they're taking comfort from a man who sells friends for soup. This letter is my confession, but it's also my warning. Anyone can become what I became. The best of us, the most loyal, the most loved, we all have a price. Mine was just bread. Someone else's might be gold or safety or a woman's touch. But we all have that moment when we choose ourselves over others, and most of us, God help us, make the wrong choice. Don't let these forbidden truths disappear. Subscribe now to ensure these voices from the archives continue to be heard. The final entry, dated February 18, 1943, 0500 hours. Mother, by the time you read this, you'll know your son was a Judas who lacked even Judas's courage to hang himself. You'll know that the boy you kissed goodbye at the station, who promised to come home with honor, became the very thing we were fighting against. A betrayer, a parasite, a soul seller. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I ask only that you remember Pavel, Sergei, and Dmitri as they were brave, loyal, true. Build them a monument in your heart where my name should have been. Tell their families they died as heroes because they did. They died believing in friendship until the very end, never knowing that friendship had already killed them. And if you must remember me, remember only this. I was weak where they were strong, false where they were true, and I lived where they died. That is my epitaph, written in bread and blood. I sold my comrades for a ration, and now I sell my confession for whatever peace the truth might bring you. This is my last letter. Your son, who was and is no more, Mikhail. The archivist sets down the letter with trembling hands. Attached to it is a small photograph, water-damaged and faded. For young men in uniform, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling at the camera. Someone, perhaps Mikhail himself, had drawn a circle around 3 of the faces and written on the back, "The ones I killed." The 4th face, Mikhail's, has been carefully cut out with scissors, leaving only a hole where a friend should have been. Dr. Savalyeva would later testify that this letter changed how she viewed the entire archive. "We catalog heroism and sacrifice," she said. "But this letter reminds us that war's greatest casualties aren't always counted in graves. Sometimes they're counted in souls that survived but shouldn't have, in men who walked home carrying deaths heavier than any pack." Military records show that Sergeant Mikhail Petrovich Volkov was killed in action on February 19, 1943, during the final phase of the Stalingrad offensive. Witnesses reported he refused to take cover during an artillery barrage, standing upright while others dove for shelter. He was 22 years old. The letter was found in his uniform pocket, sealed and addressed. It took 76 years to reach its destination. Not the village of Krasny Gorky, which no longer exists, but here, to us, to this moment where his confession finally finds its witnesses. His mother, Anna Petrovna Volkova, died in 1959, never knowing what became of her son after his last cheerful letter in December 1942. Perhaps that was mercy, or perhaps she suspected. Mothers always know more than they admit. In her effects was found a photograph of the same 4 young men. But in this one, no face had been cut out. All 4 smiled eternally, frozen in a moment before hunger and choices and bread that tasted like damnation. The bread. Always we return to the bread. 300 grams of black bread, about the weight of a human heart. The transaction was that simple, that terrible. 3 hearts for 1 stomach's relief. In the mathematics of starvation, it made perfect sense. In the arithmetic of the soul, it was bankruptcy beyond redemption. Today, the letter is preserved under climate-controlled conditions, the paper slowly deteriorating despite all efforts. Each year, the words fade a little more, as if shame itself could erode ink. But high-resolution scans preserve every stroke, every tear stain, every place where the pen pressed so hard it nearly tore through. These digital ghosts ensure that Mikhail's confession will outlive the paper it was written on, outlive the archive that houses it, outlive perhaps even the memory of the war itself. There's one final detail that Dr. Savalyeva discovered only after months of research. Pavel Turkin, one of the 3 men Mikhail betrayed, had a younger sister named Maria. She was 8 when her brother died. In 1967, she became a teacher in a small school near Volgograd, built on the ruins of Stalingrad. For 40 years, she taught history to children, always emphasizing the importance of loyalty, friendship, and moral courage. She never married, never had children of her own. But she kept a photograph on her desk, her brother Pavel and his 3 friends from the village. When students asked about it, she would say, "These boys died for each other in the war. That's all anyone needs to know." She was wrong. We needed to know more. We needed to know about the bread and the choice and the letter that took 7 decades to surface. We needed to know that heroes and traitors can inhabit the same body, that hunger can speak louder than love, that some confessions come too late for forgiveness but just in time for understanding. The basement on Barricadnaya Street no longer exists. A memorial park covers the area now, with fountains and benches where families feed pigeons. Feeding birds with bread, always bread. Visitors walk past, unaware they're standing where Mikhail Volkov made his choice, where 3 friends spent their last night, where a letter was written by candlelight while shame ate through a soul like acid through metal. In the archive, more letters wait to be discovered, catalogued, understood. Each one a confession, a testimony, a piece of truth too dangerous for its time but essential for ours. They smell of age and secrecy, of choices made in extremity, of humanity tested beyond its limits. Dr. Savalyeva continues her work, knowing that every folder might contain another Mikhail, another tragedy, another reminder that war's true horror isn't just in the dying, but in what it makes the living do to survive. Mikhail Volkov wanted his mother to know the truth. 76 years late, she couldn't receive it. So it comes to us instead, we who have never known such hunger, such choices, such prices paid in bread and blood. We become the witnesses he needed, the judges he sought, the understanding he couldn't grant himself. His letter asks nothing of us except to know, to remember, to recognize that somewhere between hero and traitor lies the terrible territory of being human. I sold my comrades for a ration. 7 words that contain a universe of shame. 7 words that took 76 years to travel from a basement in Stalingrad to our comfortable present. 7 words that remind us that every person has a breaking point, and the lucky ones simply never learn where there's lies. The letter ends, but its echo continues. In every war, in every siege, in every moment when survival confronts conscience, Mikhail's choice waits to be made again. The only difference is the price. Sometimes it's bread, sometimes silver, sometimes safety, sometimes silence. But the transaction remains the same. What we owe to others weighed against what we need for ourselves. This is not a story of redemption. Mikhail found none, sought none, deserved none by his own accounting. This is a story of recognition, that the monster in the basement might have been the singer in the church, that the traitor at the table might have been the friend at your side, that the price of a soul might be as simple as bread when you're hungry enough. 3 friends died believing in brotherhood. 1 friend lived knowing he had murdered that belief. Which is the greater tragedy? The answer dies with each generation that forgets such choices existed, that pretends they were made by different creatures than ourselves. Mikhail Volkov was human. That's the horror. That's the truth. That's the warning his letter carries across the decades like a disease looking for new hosts. The archive closes at 6. Dr. Savalyeva locks the letter away, but its words have already escaped, spreading like water through cracks, finding every conscience that thinks itself secure. Tomorrow she'll catalog another file, discover another truth too terrible for its time. But tonight, she'll go home and look at her own bread differently, wonder about her own price, her own basement moment that thankfully has never come. Somewhere, perhaps, the ghosts of Pavel, Sergei, and Dmitri have forgiven their friend. Such words are why archives exist, not to preserve the past but to prevent its repetition. I sold them, and in selling them I sold myself. This is my last letter. Your son who was and is no more. The silence that follows these words isn't empty. It's full of every choice unmade, every betrayal uncommitted, every piece of bread shared rather than hoarded. Listen to that silence. It sounds like redemption for those who haven't fallen yet.